Well, I recently watched a fascinating documentary series on Netflix called Wild Wild Country, which is all about a religious cult in rural Oregon. And it's so interesting to me that people who are so intelligent and kind and compassionate and so seemingly well-adjusted can be so easily caught up in the pull of a religious cult. Watching this series reminded me to dig up an old magazine clipping I've saved about the 6 characteristics of a cult. They are: the leadership dictates how members should think, act, and feel. There is no tolerance for questions or critical inquiry. Rational thought is discouraged or forbidden. Leadership induces feelings of shame or guilt in order to influence or control its members. Group is elitist, claiming special exalted status. The group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. Based on those 6 characteristics, I realized that there are so many people that I know today, right here in West Michigan, who belong to a cult. And that cult is the Christian church they belong to. Let me read those characteristics to you again and see if you know any Christian churches which are like this. The leadership dictates how members should think, act, and feel. There's no tolerance for questions or critical inquiry. Rational thought is discouraged or forbidden. Leadership induces feelings of shame or guilt in order to influence or control its members. Group is elitist, claiming special exalted status. The group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. Those 6 characteristics are characteristics of many evangelical and conservative Christian churches in America today. Churches which dictate how members should think. Churches which proclaim salvation status. Churches which seek to convert others, and churches which discourage critical inquiry or rational thought. It's why there are so many people in our country today who refuse to believe in evolution and instead believe in a talking snake simply because it's written about in an ancient book which was written by primitive people. People who believe without questioning, people who blindly follow a group, be it a religious or political group, without critical inquiry or rational thinking, are people who belong to a cult. We at Douglas UCC don't want anyone here to be involved in a cult. Yes, we are a Christian church, part of the Christian denomination, but we say in our church's mission statement that we are a church that's more about the questions than the answers. The sign hanging in the entrance of our church says, "We believe there is more value in questioning than in absolutes." For example, last Sunday, on Easter Sunday, our holiest holy day as Christians, I questioned whether Jesus physically rose from the dead. I would not be able to question that at 99.9% of Christian churches in America today. But most people don't come to church to ponder questions or to think for themselves. Most people come to church wanting answers. And there are plenty of churches here in West Michigan that will give you answers. I don't have your answers. Any spiritual teacher who tells you they have the answers doesn't have the answer. We are gathered here each Sunday not to check our brains at the door, but to explore the questions together. That doesn't mean that we're not people of great faith. In fact, just the opposite is so. Many people think that if you doubt or question something about your religion, then your faith must not be very strong. But the contemporary Christian writer Anne Lamott says, the opposite of faith isn't doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. There are so many Christians today who are so certain that they have the answer, but that isn't faith. Certainty is the opposite of faith. In the New York Times last year, there was an editorial entitled, "God is a Question, Not an Answer," written by Professor William Irwin. In it, he said, "Belief without doubt would not be required by an all-loving God, and it should not be worn as a badge of honor. People who claim certainty about God worry me, both those who believe and those who don't believe. They do not really listen to the other side of the conversations, and they are ready to impose their views on others. It is impossible to be certain about God." Most people of great faith that I know are people who express doubt. In journal entries that were published shortly after her death, even Mother Teresa expressed doubts. She expressed towards the end of her life that she had doubts that God even existed. That doesn't mean she wasn't a person of great faith. It means that she was. The Christian theologian Paul Tillich wrote, "Doubt isn't the opposite of faith. It is an element of faith." And that's why I always thought that the Apostle Thomas got a bad rap. We've come to refer to him as Doubting Thomas. He was considered the bad apostle because he had questions and doubts. But let's look at today's gospel story for the second Sunday of Easter. The other apostles were locked in a room together. Jesus, who they thought was their Messiah who would save them, had just been crucified. I can guarantee you that they were expressing a lot of fear and a lot of doubt while they were gathered in that room. I'm sure they were doubting whether or not they had been right about Jesus. So Thomas, I'm sure, wasn't the only one with doubts. What I think Thomas is saying to the others in today's gospel is, look, you guys had a vision of the resurrected Jesus. You experienced him firsthand, and that's why you believe. Well, I want to have that experience too. Then I'll believe. He wasn't calling the other apostles liars. He was simply saying that he too wanted to have an experience of the risen Christ, just like they had had. He wanted to know it for himself, firsthand, rather than believe some secondhand account. And look what happens. Jesus doesn't punish Thomas for having doubts. Jesus rewards him for his questioning and for his doubts. Jesus gives Thomas the first-hand experience that he was asking for. Jesus says, "Touch me, feel my aliveness." Some of you may know that there is actually a Gospel of Thomas, but it's not in the Bible. The Gospel of Thomas is one of the Gnostic Gospels that was discovered in 1945 in Egypt and has been verified by historians and theologians. When the Bible was being compiled by the early church, they decided not to include the Gospel of Thomas and the other Gnostic Gospels, and they hid those writings until they were discovered in 1945. So who were the Gnostics? Well, the Gnostics were early Christians like Thomas, who believed that we could experience the Christ presence for ourselves, firsthand. The word Gnostic means knowing, but it's not knowing of the head. It's not intellectual knowledge. It means intimacy, an inner knowing, a knowledge of the heart. It's about having a first-hand knowledge of the Christ, not because somebody told you about it or because you read it in a book, but because you yourself have experienced it firsthand. I told you last Sunday that the resurrection, whether it actually took place or is a myth, is real for me because I have experienced it firsthand for myself. I have felt the presence of the risen Christ with me and within me firsthand. And that's why I believe. Not because somebody told me to believe. I don't want to hear secondhand accounts. I want to have a firsthand account, an intimate knowledge, just like Thomas. And like Thomas, I would not have had that intimate experience without my doubts and questions. They have not weakened my faith, they've strengthened it. All of us on the spiritual journey are on a spiritual quest. And the word quest is part of the word questioning. I believe that our unquestioned beliefs are the greatest obstacle on the spiritual path. These are the beliefs that we've unknowingly and unquestioningly taken on from our churches, our parents, and our society. Beliefs that we've never once questioned. In Romans 12, verse 2, it says, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." That is why prayer and meditation are so important on the spiritual quest, because all of our answers are within. When we become still and know, we renew our minds, we transform our thinking so that we, like Thomas, can experience firsthand, intimate knowledge of the divine presence. And so, this Easter season, my friends, let us go forth to experience the risen Christ for ourselves by bringing our doubts and questions to the light. Let us be people humbly living the questions rather than people arrogantly proclaiming that we have everyone's answers. Namaste.